a lot of the decision making that goes into a disease that a company is going to develop a drug for has to do with the number of patients affected with a disease, right? This is not, I'm not a business guy, but even I understand that, you know. So it's not going to be based really on science. It's going to be based on market considerations. And you know, we understand why that is. And obviously the industry has brought some amazing drugs to patients. So it's not to bash industry, it's just dealing with reality. But when you look at particularly single gene disorders, yes, there may be thousands, but when you really come down to it, it's either a loss of function or a gain of function, you know, recessive or dominant. And you think about recessives, there's a limited number of these type of, you know, abnormalities. There's premature stop codons, misfolded proteins, and abnormal splicing. I think of them as the big three. And we have potential therapeutic strategies now for all those. Drugs that read through premature stop codons, drugs that could impact the cellular pathways that regulate protein folding, and antisense oligonucleotides or other drugs that would treat abnormal splicing. And for dominant diseases, you could think about also antisense oligonucleotides, for example. So, but then if you break it down even farther, there's other ways to group diseases. And there's a whole lot of ways to do it, but at some point it's an academic question. To me, it becomes different if you have a therapeutic. So another one that's kind of a favorite are these diseases that affect a molecular pathway, like the RAS pathway or the mTOR pathway or the JAK-STAT pathway. So an approach to that then is to develop and support clinical trials. If you have a drug that targets a molecular pathway that cuts across multiple diseases, why not design the clinical trial in the beginning with that in mind, instead of doing one disease after the other with the same drug? Because again, if you're going to do that, if a company is going to do it, they're going to go over after the most common diseases, and the really, really rare ones are left behind. But if you change the way you think about, you know, what is a disease and how you define it, if you define it as someone who has a molecular abnormality that would respond to a drug, then you've almost have a different definition of disease, but it's very practical because it's based on the idea of a drug that might target it. And so, and this is not a brand new idea. This is now how I think the cutting edge of oncology drugs work. We understand that different types of tumors, and there's different, you know, tumors all over the body, different anatomical sites, but there's actually a limited number of molecular pathways that lead to cancer. And if you can target one of those pathways with a drug, the patients you want to treat are ones whose tumors have that abnormality, regardless of where they are in the body. And that's sometimes called tissue agnostic. That approach is called tissue agnostic basket trials in oncology, and has actually led to drug approvals. So one of the things we're trying to do is focus on that approach. And we have funding opportunities where we're specifically supporting projects that are going to do a clinical trial of more than one disease using one of these drugs that target a shared molecular pathway, and trying to extend that and popularize and sort of normalize that approach. And in addition to that funding opportunity and projects we're funding, we're also involved in this international organization called IRDIRC, the International Rare Disease Research Consortium, to try to extend this idea to people around the world, because people around the world are thinking about it, and you know, it's the same problem basically. So that's one way we try to go to more than one disease at a time.